in the summer of 2022, I had pretty much reached the lowest point in my life. It was like I was in a semi-depressed state and I was only really able to find joy in life and I was doing the bad habits. I was eating mountains of junk food, like whole Costco bags of chips, while playing video games for 10 hours a day and then scrolling endlessly, finding more content to numb myself on. And all of these bad habits, just like the average teen. Now, in about a year and a half, maybe a little bit more, I've been able to completely change my life around. I've quit pretty much all of my bad habits and I'm able to actually feel joy in life right now without having to overstimulate myself or numb myself with endless scrolling, porn, video games, junk food. I became one of the most athletic kids in my school and in my cricket club. I lost 20 pounds. And in this video, I'm going to give you the step-by-step roadmap in order to achieve this and bounce back from whatever depression you might be going from. So if you don't know me, my name's Atharv and I help teens struggling with bad mental health and just stuck in a rut change their life around just like I did. And the good news is, in order to achieve this, it only really takes like a week or two in order to fully acclimatize to this new lifestyle of improving yourself. So here's your problem. You've tried to change your life around, right? You've tried to get rid of video games. You've tried on several occasions in order to try to cut out junk food and become fit. None of it really stuck, did it, right? And the reason that this didn't happen is because you didn't focus on the one thing that actually matters, and that is your identity. So what do I mean by this? So your identity is pretty much how you see yourself as a person. When you have a specific identity, you're sort of funneling yourself towards certain behaviors. If you have an identity of jacking off every single morning, well, you're going to be more inclined to do that every single day. It's going to funnel you towards that action. That's just your mind and how it works. And so what's happened is that you've tried to quit video games. You've tried to stop eating junk food, even though I have a sweet tooth. And basically what happens is it's sort of like trying to move a rubber band. You might get a little bit of distance, but then it snaps back into place. What's happened is that because you haven't focused on actually building this new identity for yourself, you've ended up trying something in vain because it just didn't stick. It didn't work. And I'm going to give you the blueprint to actually get out of this vicious cycle of trying to get rid of these habits but then ultimately snapping back. Because here's a loophole that I've found. It also works the other way. Your behavior is what shapes your identity as well. So every single time you've eaten junk food, all the thousands of times where you reach for the chips and eaten them, you reinforce this identity within yourself of being this certain person. All the fat jokes you tell about yourself makes it so that you have this identity now of being the fat kid in the friend group. And so what's happened is that you've conditioned yourself to believe in this identity, and this identity inclines you to do the behaviors that reinforce it. And while this may sound like a little bit negative because like, oh man, I'm screwed, aren't I? It's actually not that hard to get out of the state because all you need to do is just start doing the actions that reinforce a new identity for yourself. So what I mean by this is, let's say you have a scale, right? And every single day you put a small stone onto that scale. That stone represents an action that you've done. So let's say you've eaten the junk food even when you knew it wasn't good for you. Well, now you've just placed a stone on this identity scale to just tilt a little bit more towards being fat. And so what we need to do is we need to start placing stones on the other side. We need to start doing the actions that will outweigh this identity and create a new one. But there's one problem. These bad habits, video games, junk food, porn, scrolling, these are all meticulously designed to be as addicting as possible, right? So it's really easy to do the bad habits, but it's really difficult to do like a 1-hour study session. You can play 6 hours of video games fine, but as soon as you're being told to do an hour of studying, your brain just switches off, right? And so what do? If it's really hard to do the good habits and it's really easy to do the bad ones, we're going to gravitate towards doing the bad habits now, right? If you have an addiction to porn, you're not going to be able to force yourself to do the good habits now. If you have all these addictions that are vying for your attention, it's going to be really hard to commit to a 1-hour study session every single day. So what do? In order to change our identity, to start placing stones on the other side of the scale, we need to start off small, with small wins. So what do I mean by this? So small wins are pretty much just you doing the action, the good habit, at a really small scale. So when it comes to studying, for example, you literally study for 5 minutes. That's all. And here's the thing. Every single action, big or small, adds weight to the side of the scale. So when you have these two sides, every single time you do 5 minutes of studying, a small stone is being placed on the scale. It's very minimal. There's not going to be much of a tilt. However, it is progress. So let's say you do a 30-second plank after that. Now there's another little stone placed on the scale. And what happens is that over time, these stones get accumulated. And suddenly now you have this new idea. Because just think about it for a second. You never chose to have this identity of being like the fat kid, right? But you chose to do the small things. You chose to put the small scales of eating the small packet of junk. Maybe it's not going on a run because you want to play video games instead. Maybe it was through scrolling endlessly for hours every single day, frying your dopamine, making yourself unmotivated to actually do the good habits. When you did all these small things that didn't seem like much at the time, all of a sudden now there's a mountain of rocks on this part of the scale, and now your identity has been formed of like okay, I don't know the good habits. And so what happens is that you did the small things a lot of times in order to get to this end result. So what we need to do is we need to do the same thing for this side. It's not about doing a 3-hour workout. It's not about doing a 4-hour study session and becoming an A+ student yet. All it's about is getting the reps in, placing small stones on this side of the scale so that eventually it becomes effortless for you to do the good habits because it's your identity now. Start small. That's the reason you've been held back. You've been trying to commit to a 2-hour workout every single day before you've even been able to do a push-up. Because think about it, when you're playing video games and you're starting out and you're at level 1, do you go and try to slay the Ender Dragon or something? No, you don't. You start by just doing the small things, getting a little bit of XP, maybe upgrading your armor, maybe enchanting your armor, maybe doing these small things, small steps, until eventually you're like the best in the whole server. You're the most powerful. You don't start out by doing the big task, the big 2-hour study session, because you're not ready for that yet. What you need is to simply sit down and do 5 minutes of focused work. Maybe you're just reviewing your notes for an exam the next day. That's it. And what we do is we just continuously do these small actions every single day, and then we record them. So what you need to do is take a note down. Okay, what are the good habits that I'm going to do? What are the small actions, small stones that I'm going to place on the scale to eventually bring me to where I want? So you write down these actions on a piece of paper. So it might be, okay, 30-second plank. You can do that, right? It's not that difficult. Now you have maybe, okay, 5 minutes of studying. Whatever it is, just do these small things, small actions. And so what we do is we write these out on a piece of paper, and then we track the times we do them. So what I mean by this is that you write sort of these little boxes that represent each day of the week, and you just tick them off each day you do the habit. And now here's a really important part that you need to make sure of. What you basically need to do is to create like an almost XP bar for yourself. So you have 7 boxes and you have like 2 rows of them. And now you stick that piece of paper onto your wall, and every single time you do the habit, you just tick it off. And what this does is, let's say you tape it to your desk in your bedroom. Every single time you walk past it, you're going to see the small improvements. You're going to see that you're becoming this new person. It's going to reinforce this identity within yourself. You're writing down these really easy things, right? And so what happens is that as you do them, you're going to start creating this identity for yourself. You all of a sudden have like 50 small stones on the side of the scale, and it's starting to change your identity now. You might have this belief of like, oh, I'm not going to make any progress with 30 seconds of plank and 5 minutes of studying. Yeah, but that's not the point. The point is not to make progress at, because that's above you. You're here and like making huge progresses up here. You were never going to commit to, again, a 2-hour workout. You were never going to commit to anything like that for more than a few days. What we're trying to do here is to create a new identity for yourself. And this can literally be life-changing. Because when you start adding these small stones onto the scale, suddenly, oh wait, now I'm capable of maybe doing more. And so we increased the 5-minute studying block to like 20 minutes. We increased the 30 seconds plank to maybe 5 sets of that. Maybe a run with it too. What we do is we start, pretty much what we're trying to do is we're trying to add more stones to the scale. We're trying to vote for this new identity for yourselves and reinforcing it. So all of a sudden now it's part of your identity to work out. It's part of your identity to do all the good habits. All you need to do now is just commit to this small program for just 2 weeks. So again, you just write down some of the really small versions of the good habits, like 5 minutes of studying, 30-second plank, 5 breaths of meditation. And then we just stick it onto our wall with these little boxes to tick off as we go. And now what happens is that after a few weeks, you've suddenly been able to reinforce this identity for yourself. And now all of a sudden, you're able to start building onto that. And now here's the thing. Once you've done this, once you've gone for a few weeks doing the good habits, now we can worry about cutting out the bad habits. Because here's the thing. You've been playing video games for tens of hours now, every single day. You have been eating copious amounts of junk food. You've been wanking your meat off every single day. You've been doing all of the bad habits. But what happens is that every single time you try to remove them, to cut them out of your life, it sort of creates a vacuum, because now you have all this time and then you just feel bored. So you just go back to your baseline, which is video games, junk food, scrolling, all of these bad habits. You need to first introduce some good habits to your life that can ultimately replace the bad habits. So after like a week or 2 of this, now we start actually cutting out the bad habits. We start like overloading the amount of time we're doing the good habits. So instead of 5 minutes of studying, again, it's 25 minutes of studying. We reduce the amount of time we play video games, and then we sort of let our identity overtake these bad habits. Now that we're actually able to be consistent in the good habits, we can start actually getting rid of the bad habits. So many people go about this the wrong way. They try to first cut out the bad habits before introducing the good habits, but that doesn't make sense. Because you've been leveling up the bad habit scale to like level 50, but the good habits are at like level 5 right now. And so what happens is that you're not really able to fill up the void with good habits yet because you don't even do them. You don't have an identity for them. Once we start creating the identity for ourselves, now we can cut out the bad habits. And now all of it just gets easy. When I found a video like this describing to me this model, it genuinely changed my life. So I'm actually hoping, so I beg of you to just take action on this advice. Start doing the small habits, like the really minuscule version of those good habits repeatedly over a period of time. Reinforce a new identity for yourself. I use this advice to literally change my life around. It only took me a week. It literally only took me about 2 weeks to start doing the good habits more, and then suddenly I was able to cut out my addiction. So my challenge to you is to actually take action on this advice and to start creating this new identity for yourself, and to start actually thinking of ways where you can introduce these good habits to yourself. So just as a recap, think small, do the small habits over a long period of time in order to actually reinforce an identity. So just a quick recap, your identity is what determines your behavior, and so you can't simply just cut out the bad habits if it's part of your identity. Your behavior is also what influences your identity, and when you do the small things over a period of time, it suddenly creates an identity for yourself that you begin to just adhere to, that you can't escape. Your identity is not created by one big event, but by multiple small actions that have ultimately tipped the scales in that identity. So if you want to change your identity, just do the small habits over a few weeks, and then all of a sudden you have a new identity for yourself. So this is literally life-changing advice that when I implemented genuinely changed my life. So I hope that you actually take a little bit of action and just figure out your small wins and do them. Trust me, you will not regret it. So yeah, that's all I have for today. Go down and click the subscribe button so that you get more videos just like this posted to your feed. My name's Adarv. See you soon.